Université Paris Diderot. While you share your screen, I can give you a short introduction. So Clémence is a doctoral student, and the talk will be about cancer and aging, a complex yet scientifically stimulating relationship. So you can start when you're ready.
Yeah, can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes, everything works well.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for inviting me today. I will talk about cancer and aging, so two biological phenomena that share a complex but scientifically stimulating relationship. So just to give you briefly some elements of context. So as you said, I'm currently a PhD student in my third year in philosophy of science. I'm being supervised by a guy who is a philosopher in Université Paris, Laboratoire Sphère. My methodology is mainly based on an epistemological and conceptual approach. So what I do mostly is a review of published scientific literature in the biology of aging, not the biology of cancer. And I also did some interviews with specialists in the field, and I also did an observation field at the beginning of my PhD. So my main goals are to identify the main corpuses in order to highlight the main theories of the field, the underlying working hypotheses, the main characteristics, the structuring concepts of the domain, and thus to expose the main representations, conceptions, definitions of aging that are conveyed by biology. And then I would like to check whether these are in line with the perception of aging by individuals and by the society. And if I can, to answer the following question: what could the biology of aging bring to the public debate on aging and longevity? And so in this context, I became interested in the relationship between aging and cancer. So I will probably echo at least a bit the first presentation of the day. So just a quick introduction. Of course, as you probably all know, the hypothesis of a link between cancer and aging was initially derived from population studies. So for example, as Berger et al. Put it in 2006, the number of older persons with cancer is expected to significantly rise because of the overall aging of the population and because of the fact that cancer incidence and cancer mortality exponentially rise the older age groups. And so as you all know, older individuals are more prone to develop cancer than younger individuals. And so faced with this, what I would call explosion of cancers, there has been a collective awareness, both at the national and international levels. But even if the demographic link between aging and cancer may seem quite easy to understand, I think that the hypothesis of a link, of a biological link between cancer and aging remains far from being obvious, and yet it's very interesting to see that it appears recurrently in the contemporary literature. Probably, I think the most famous example is this one. So you probably all know the article on the left-hand side, so by Anna Hahn and Weinberg in 2000, called The Hallmarks of Cancer. And in 2013, there was this paper in the middle of my slide by Lopez-Otin et al., echoing the first one and called The Hallmarks of Aging. But it's only one example among many. It's a recurrent aspect of the contemporary literature in aging biology. So what I would like to do today is to reason in 3 steps. So first, I would like to question the exact nature of this biological link between cancer and aging. So I will examine 4 possible answers, and I will try in each case to expose the main scientific basis. Then I will question the value, the interest of such a hypothesis for scientific research, and then I will quickly examine its implications, I will show its limits, and I will try to formulate a few criticisms that can be made against it. So first, what is the exact nature of the biological link and aging? According to my literature review, I believe there are at least 4 ways to understand, to consider the relationship between cancer and aging. So you can see either a causal link between the 2 phenomena, or an analogy, or an opposition, or a competition. So I will develop briefly each of them. So first, sometimes what you see between cancer and aging, it's a causal link. Then the hypothesis is it's quite simple. So aging and cancer are considered as 2 clearly distinct phenomena, but aging is a cause, or at least a risk factor, for the development of cancer. So again, Berger et al. Put it this way: advancing age is a high risk factor for cancer, with persons over 65 accounting for, I don't see percentage, 60, I think, of newly diagnosed malignancies and 70% of all cancer deaths. And from another point of view, you can see clearly that many cancers are today considered and or described as age-related diseases. But of course, talking about a risk factor is very different from proving the existence of a causal relationship. So I went for the scientific basis underlying this first hypothesis. And I found that, as you probably all know, certain physiological phenomena which occur naturally during the aging process of an organism can lead to the development of a tumor. And so, for example, Yaswan and Campisi in 2009 wrote, aging is considered by sometimes striking changes in tissue structure and function, which can also fuel the development of cancer. And among these striking changes, you have accumulation of DNA damage and lesions, progressive deterioration of the DNA repair mechanisms, alteration of intercellular communication, some epigenetic modifications, and the role of certain proteins that are considered as characteristics of aging, such as SIRT1. Then sometimes between cancer and aging, what you have is not a causal link, but mostly an analogy. So in this case, cancer and aging are seen as two analogous phenomena, and therefore aging biology can be studied by analogy with cancer. So it may seem original, but I believe it's not, since in the history of science, you have many, many examples of analogies. And the most famous one is probably Maxwell's method of physical analogy, so leading to the Maxwell equations. So here, the scientific bases are mainly the following. So this analogy can be explained or justified by the existence of a common biology to cancer and aging. So in this case, biology is a set of relevant physiological phenomena, but still I believe that the idea of a common biology can be understood in many ways, and at least in two ways. So on the one hand, you have the idea that cancer and aging share some common risk factors, such as inflammation, or such as the decline in the performance of DNA and telomere repair mechanisms. Or on the other hand, you have the idea that some physiological phenomena are common to the normal aging process and to the development of a tumor. And in 2009, Yaswan and Campisi wrote that longevity pathways intersect with cancer pathways, so underlying the existence of common pathways, such as the insulin IGF-1 pathway, to aging and to the development of a tumor. And if you believe in the existence of an analogy between the two phenomena, you have this possibility to develop a common theoretical framework. And this is, I believe, what is the basis of this parallel between the two articles I mentioned previously. And finally, what you can find between cancer and aging, the third hypothesis is of an opposition. So in this case, the idea is that cancer and aging are two radically opposed physiological phenomena. So it's, in a way, it's related to the previous one, since as you can all imagine, analogies are always limited. So you can use them to compare two phenomena, or you can use them to study one phenomenon in contrast to the other. So in this case, you use it to study aging in contrast to cancer, or the other way around. So by highlighting the differences between the two phenomena. And here the scientific basis are, I believe, some real biological oppositions. So I have the example of cellular fitness in my next slide. So you have the idea that on the one hand, cancer is based on the acquisition of a selective advantage. So as you probably all know, you have this selective advantage acquired by a small number of cells, allowing them to escape the body's controlling system and thus to proliferate. And on the other hand, you have the idea that aging is, on the contrary, characterized by a loss of cellular fitness, cellular abilities. So, for example, one of the causal factors of mammalian aging is the accumulation of senescent cells, so cells that cannot divide anymore. So as Vision Campisi put it in 2008, cancer is sometimes considered as the opposite of aging because it entails more vigorous growth. And finally, you have also sometimes the idea that cancer and aging are two phenomena in competition, one with the other. So here, according to the literature from the aging point of view, the hypothesis is that aging is a phenomenon in competition with cancer. So what's interesting, at least from my point of view, is that this competition is revealed by some very interesting terms, such as trade-offs or double-edged sword, which are terms I studied during my PhD. Here, the main scientific bases are some various double-edged physiological phenomena that are implicated both in aging and in cancer. So I have two brief examples. The first one is intercellular competition. So here you have the idea that on the one hand, intercellular competition is a form of protection, both against cancer and against aging, because it allows the elimination of non-functioning cells during the course of life. And on the other, you have the idea that intercellular competition can fuel the development of cancer because it allows the existence of cheating cells, cells that should be eliminated, but that take advantage of intercellular competition to proliferate. And the second example is the existence of a limit to the proliferation of cells, so the so-called Hayflick limit, which is often associated with telomere attrition. So in this case, again, you have on the one hand the idea that the Hayflick limit is a limit to the proliferation of cells, so it controls the risks that the mutation may lead to the development of cancer. And on the other, you have the idea that this Hayflick limit can fuel the development of cancer. Because it eventually leads the cells into a state of senescence, and this can fuel the aging of tissues. And so you have this idea that cellular senescence can act both as a carcinogen and as an anti-carcinogen. So again, you have a kind of trade-off between cancer and cellular senescence, and so against between cancer and aging in the aging process. What I would like to develop now is the following question. So what is the value, what is the interest of such a hypothesis for scientific research and more specifically for aging biology? So I believe there is at least a triple interest of this hypothesis for researchers and scientists. First, I think there is definitely a methodological interest. So as you all know, there is today a huge amount of articles published in cancer biology, and there have been already many articles published. And in those articles, you have many theoretical considerations, many hypotheses that are associated with various experimental strategies. So I believe there are at least two possibilities, to use this literature to fuel the aging research. So either from a very theoretical point of view, we can reuse some interesting theoretical frameworks, some original scientific approaches, some relevant concepts or interesting working hypotheses. And on the other hand, from the very practical technical point of view, you can choose to reinvest some useful technical tools, interesting experimental strategies, etc. But I believe this hypothesis of a link between cancer and aging also has a strong heuristic value. So what I mean here is that the existence, or at least the hypothesis of a link between cancer and aging biologies can be seen as a very fruitful scientific hypothesis. So again, you can see two ways. You can either choose to explore the analogy between cancer and aging to highlight the similarities, the existence of a common biology, or you can choose to question the limits and the relevance of this analogy by focusing on the main differences. What I think we have to keep in mind in this case is that comparing cancer and aging biology is an interesting perspective, an interesting point of view to study and to understand aging, and maybe also to study and to understand cancer. But of course, others do exist and are interesting as well. So as Andrew Reynolds put it in his book, The Third Lens, of course, no single approach can be complete. Every perspective is selective. We might say these perspectives are different tools, and just that there is no universal tool that is optimal for every task, we should not expect one perspective or approach that is universally or canonically correct. And finally, this hypothesis of a link between cancer and aging definitely has a community-based interest. So what I mean here is that by bringing the biology of aging closer to cancer research, I think it could give it considerable weight. So I would like to say that cancer research is today, I think, quite trendy and well-funded. So I believe this hypothesis could encourage new collaborations, the creation of new teams, the drafting of new projects, and probably allow researchers to get access to new sources of funding. And so just one quick example, if we focus on France, we have the example of the ARC Foundation, which claims to be 100% dedicated to cancer research, which showed a willingness to set up a new research program precisely on cancer and aging. So you probably know that in September there was this virtual symposium organized at the national level in order to get together all the teams working on this theme to identify either the already existing or the future research programs, to locate the existing resources and infrastructures. And the idea is to launch a funding action in the first quarter of 2021. So it's definitely here a community-based interest. And finally, the last question, which is the one I'm the most interested in, is what are the implications of this hypothesis? So in a way, what are its limits and what kind of criticisms can be made? So what I would like to underline here is the fact that drawing a parallel between cancer and aging, it's not neutral, it has many consequences. So I will underline a few points. First, I think it questions, again, the boundary between what is normal and what is pathological. So just to remember the main questions, if you work from the aging point of view, the main questions are, is aging really a normal phenomenon? Or maybe should or could some of its characteristics be considered as pathological? And if you work from the cancer point of view, one of the questions would be, to what extent could we consider certain cancers as an almost natural evolution of the body? So this parallel between cancer and aging, of course, contributes to a form of what I would call pathologization of aging, leading to a form of confusion in the public space, and definitely contributing to the dissemination of a negative image of old age and the end of life. So I think it could have some social consequences in the way the society would deal with old age and the end of life. Quite differently, the use of an analogy in itself, I believe it poses more general problems. So some of the consequences of this hypothesis are more generally related to the use of analogies in general. So among the questions we have to ask ourselves are the following: do these similarities between the two phenomena really exist? Or have they been artificially introduced by researchers that were eager to find some similarities between the two phenomena? So here, my point is only to underline that it's always crucial to keep in mind the limits of any analogy. And so this hypothesis in particular is nothing more than one perspective, one approach, one point of view, among others, of course. And an extreme statement would be to say that research on aging can and should not become a subdomain of cancer research. And finally, I think that the hypothesis of a link between cancer and aging reveals a very special attitude, could reveal a special attitude of researchers towards aging. So I would like to just to underline 3 points. The first one is that cancer is not a disease like any other. So it's not the same as comparing aging and any disease. So just a few points to think. So cancer is one of the greatest threats to human beings today. It's not any disease. It's a universal threat since everyone is potentially exposed to it. So it could explain why we chose to compare aging and cancer. And you have many representations that are associated with this disease. So I don't have time to develop, but my point is that comparing aging and cancer is not neutral. It's very different from comparing aging and any disease. My second point is that recently there has been a progressive fragmentation of cancer into cancers, so into multiple pathologies. So you can even see it on the INCA website. So one question would be, are we also going towards a fragmentation of aging research, and does it still make sense? And my third point is that I would like to underline the fact that the attitude toward cancer and toward cancers has changed a lot over the last few decades. So I have at least 2 points. The first one is that, in a way, the threat of cancer no longer has the same scope as before. So I will quote Laurent Alexandre's book La défaite du cancer, even if I didn't particularly like it. But the interesting point is that he qualifies cancer as a chronic disease that, according to him, will be under control by 2030. So similarly, will aging eventually be under control? According to some researchers, it will be the case, but you may or may not agree with this statement. And another point, the literature, there is a form of subjectification of cancer, of this disease, which is increasingly described as a subject, as an actor. So for example, in Siddhartha Mukherjee's book, A Biography of Cancer, you have the idea that one catches a flu or a virus or a cold, but that a tumor invades the brain or a cancer progresses. So here you can see some differences with the aging process. So on the contrary, can aging be separated from the normal functioning of an organism? I hope I'm clear. My main point is that the parallel between cancer and aging may definitely change our vision and understanding of aging, and maybe respectively our vision and understanding of cancer. So to conclude, what I would like to strengthen is that the existence of a link between aging and cancer is definitely an interesting scientific hypothesis, both extremely fertile and highly operational, so for scientific research in general and for the biology of aging in particular. However, I hope I underlined it enough. It remains a hypothesis, so it must be apprehended and manipulated as such, meaning with great caution and full awareness of its limits. And I leave you with one question, because I'm not a specialist of this field. Maybe and could cancer research also benefit from this parallel? So I believe it could be the case, but I leave you with this question. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Clémence. Let's see if we can get the other participants up here. Yes, okay. So questions and comments for Clémence? Maybe is the screen still?
I do have a question.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Please just ask it. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the organizers of this session of talks, because I'm not at all from this area. I don't work at all in molecular biology or disease or cancer. So thank you very much for the organizers. That's the first thing. Second, Clémence, I really enjoyed your talk. It was really, really interesting and good. So thank you very much for being so clear. May I be a bit of a pain? So you are clearly a philosopher, and you start by asking, is there a link between aging and cancer? But isn't there, in fact, as usual in philosophy, the problem is you want to explain one word, but you end up using 20 or hundreds, which you claim you know, when actually you're trying to explain only one. And now, what is aging? What is cancer? Even that is questionable, isn't it? Are all cancers the same? Why do we call them all cancers? And then how do you define what cancer is, except by the fact that you have decided they're the same, then you look for what is common, and then you decide, okay, then this must be what defines cancer. But that's a bit circular, and same for aging. Is aging the same? Whichever your social origins, whichever your culture. So then what you mean by aging, in fact, would have to be specified. Is it aging at the cellular, at the organismic, at what level? And again, which again brings back to some form of risk of circularity. So sorry, you have 3 hours to answer.
Yeah.
No.
I believe I have 3 minutes. Yeah, of course, it's very interesting what you just said. Of course, I chose to present only a small part of my PhD work, so I don't have time to answer all the questions. I tried to raise some of the issues you're referring to, I believe, in the end, when I talked about this fragmentation of cancer research. And I believe this especially at this point, this fragmentation of cancer research is extremely interesting when you want to draw a parallel between cancer and aging. Because I believe in cancer research today, there is definitely this fragmentation. It's almost natural to talk about cancers and not cancer. It's many diseases and not only one. And on the other hand, you have in aging research, I believe there is this kind of paradox that on the one hand, you study aging as one universal phenomenon, and on the other, you have always the idea that aging depends on the species, and aging depends on the individual. So yes, of course, it's way more complicated than what I just presented, but I chose a small perspective, of course. But thank you very much.
We look forward to reading your whole dissertation whenever it's ready. So Maël also has a question or a comment.
I have a comment. Actually, really nice presentation. It's really nice to put this nice summary of the aging and cancer. And you know, I'm talking from the cell molecular biology standpoint. I'm not a philosopher. It's a different animal for me. You know, for aging and cancer research, like in my mind, cancer is a part of the aging process. It's one of the age-related diseases. You are talking about cancer, Alzheimer, Parkinson's disease, cardiovascular diseases. That all comes together like in one package. Like in your presentation, you try to present it like it's some parallel process, but in my mind, it's not a parallel. It's one big complex issues which start somewhere when we start aging process, but I don't know when it happens. Some people say it's probably at 50s, some people say it's 20s. But when we have the aging process, then all the age-related diseases start to come up as well. And cancer is one of them. But it's absolutely agree. It's absolutely important to draw this parallel between the cancer and aging, because one of the big problems is all the oncologists, because when they develop any kind of the treatment against cancer, they first try it on the mice, of course, on the mouse model, then on the younger population or middle-aged population. But the problem is that majority of the cancer patients, they are really old people. It means you have to apply that treatment which was developed on the middle-aged people, which is relatively healthy, and to apply it to really weak and fragile population, which is dying from almost any kind of treatments. That means we need to adjust, you know, these treatments according to the age group which will be treated on. You know, it's absolutely important to have that connection, but in my mind, it's like one bigger complex picture, starting from aging and going to all age-related disease. Yeah.
Thank you for your comment, Andrei. I can see the time is running and we have Maël and Simon also raised their hands. So what I suggest is that we give each of you time to ask your question or post your comment, and then maybe Clémence, you can like answer after both of them. Is that okay? Okay, good. So Maël first.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So I think, no, I will pass my question. It's easy for me to ask Clémence my question later on.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah. Then Simon.
Okay, sure. So this is definitely in relation to the earlier comment, but I was sort of, I don't know, puzzled by why you didn't choose to spend any time on explaining the geroscience hypothesis, which to me is like, this is perhaps it might just be me, and then that's one thing, and then your in the beginning of your presentation you had these 4 different logical possibilities in terms of relationship between aging and cancer, and to me you sort of used cellular senescence as both an opposition and a you used it both as the third and the fourth. To me, I can't recall the names you used for it. Okay, well, this
in 2 of them, yeah, I believe, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it was just sort of it's not super conceptually clear if you use cellular senescence for both of them. Do you get my point?
Yeah, I think so, but I think it reveals precisely this ambiguity in the scientific literature. It means in the scientific literature, you have at least these 4 ways to consider the link between cancer and aging, but it's never very clear. And what I would like to underline is that it's it's necessary today to define what you mean when you base a whole scientific article on the idea that there is a link between cancer and aging. I was quite surprised to see Mr. Sulianov say that cancer is part of the aging process, because I think some scientists consider it's the case, and it's normal, it's obvious, but in some articles it's very, very different the way they handle the link between cancer and aging. So I think it's, on the contrary, it's interesting to see that, for example, cellular senescence, you find it in different hypotheses, because it reveals that it's still ambiguous, according to me at least.
Thank you very much, Clémence. I think we should all thank Clémence again, and we'll have the chance to hear more from Andrei Sulanov just next up. So Andrei